Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who like to dive a layer deeper into the music. So lean in close, turn up your volume, because class is in session. We're your hosts. I'm Monsi.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Happy almost Independence Day, dear listeners. As this is a holiday week, we wanted to revisit one of our favorite episodes that is particularly timely, so we are re-releasing our deep dive into the Last Great American Dynasty. So please enjoy this conversation about this incredible song, and be sure to tune in again next week for a new episode of AP Taylor Swift.
All right. On today's episode, we are doing a deep dive into the Last Great American Dynasty. This is a continuation of our show and tell episode on Marxist theory. So if you want to learn all about Marxist theory and what it has to do with Taylor Swift, press pause here, go back, listen to that one, and then jump on in, because in that one we did give a good overview and we dove a little bit into this song. But before we do a deep dive, Jen, can you remind us how we should think about literary analysis for these deep dives?
Yes. So there's a lot of ways to do literary analysis. What we have chosen as our format for these deep dives is to consider essentially the rhetorical triangle. Who is the speaker? Who are they talking to? And what is the purpose of the text? There are a lot of wrong answers in literary analysis, but there's very rarely one right answer, which is what makes it so fun. So as we have this conversation, that is a format that we can use as we're trying to, make our pitches of who we think is the speaker, who they're talking to, and what the purpose is. Always support your claims with evidence from the text. And then at the end of the episode, we'll each go through and say, okay, now that we've discussed this, now that we've analyzed this, what do we each think the purpose is? And I think so far we've always had slightly different variations, which I think is really fun. So that is our format here.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor Jen. Okay, so the Last Great American Dynasty, I gave a little bit of this context in the previous episode, but I'll share some of it again here. We got to start with who is Rebekah Harkness. She was born in 1915 into a fairly well-off family. She had a nanny. She went to finishing school. She then married. I think, had 4 marriages. Bill Harkness was her second marriage in 1947. He was the heir to the Standard Oil name and money, and that made her one of the wealthiest women in America. So, Jen, your first guidance to us to analyze this text was who is the speaker. I think, again, this is one of the few songs where it is very clear that the speaker is Taylor herself. We know that because in the bridge at the very end of it, she says, 50 years is a long time. Holiday House sat quietly on that beach, free of women with badness, their men and bad habits, and then it was bought by me. So you can really center yourself on that this is Taylor singing this song, talking about this woman who used to own this home that was hers. And we talked about this in the previous show and tell, but Rebekah is positioned as an other from the town, right? So she's positioned as quote unquote middle class, that she took the train. She's a middle class divorcee. They talk about her wedding as charming, if a little gauche. They say that, they picked out a home, which normally I think of a home as like a warm term to describe where you live. But in the context of what these were, which were mansions, to call it Holiday House, it's not a house. Apparently, after her husband, Bill Harkness, died, she redid the house to have 8 kitchens and 21 bathrooms. That ain't a house. That's a hotel.
I'm sorry. This is the thing I've always wondered about big houses. Why? Someone explain to me
in that instance. She also took this home and turned it partly into a space for the ballet company that she created. She was a patron of what is now known as the Joffrey Ballet. Then there was a falling out, and then she started the Harkness Ballet. And so when it says she blew through the money on the boys in the ballet, she started a ballet.
That is the only valid answer I've ever heard to that question in my entire life.
Part of that home into, she had ballerinas, and she threw incredible parties.
I feel like you have to have a million hobbies if you've got that many rooms. Like, I imagine somebody's like, this is my theater room, and this is my painting room, and this is my
some other fun things I learned about her. Her 1955 tone poem, Safari Suite, was performed at Carnegie Hall. And in 1957, she released an album titled Music with a Heartbeat. So this is a woman who had a ton of hobbies, a ton of friends. Anyway, back to the song. I don't even remember what I was saying. Positioned her as middle class, not middle class.
Home is really a mansion / hotel.
Home is really a mansion, yet she's very othered by the people around her. And I believe that the speaker is Taylor, but I feel like the perspective is the townspeople, because she calls it a home. She says the parties were tasteful but a little loud. My favorite thing about the word loud here is you could take it literally to mean the parties were too like vocally loud for the town, but also loud often means tacky or not fitting in.
In your face, yeah.
In your face. And then, they call her the maddest woman this town has ever seen, the most shameless woman this town has ever seen. She is ruining everything, but she had a marvelous time doing it. So she is put in the perspective of, you are not welcome here. You are other. You are, what are you doing here? Yet you still like her in the song. Like, there's nothing about her that I'm like, oh my God, she's awful. I'm like, oh, she sounds fun. I kind of want to be here. I want to know her.
This is where one of those songs where I'm reminded of Taylor's country roots. The storytelling is incredible. I mean, her use of voice in this specifically, when she's doing, it's a song. So it's the same singer singing it. It's not like she brings in other singers, but it is so clear when you're listening to the song that it's the townspeople. When she says, how did a middle-class divorcee do it? Like, you could just hear the old women like gossiping, like, how did that, like, you can just hear the voice of the townspeople throughout this song. She's done it so well with her use of words like gauche. Like, that is something my grandmother would say, like, wedding is charming, but a little gauche. Like, a lovely use of just, I don't know, little dialect, little isms,
Yeah, and I also think, though, that's where we get into this idea of false consciousness, which, again, go back and listen to the last episode if you want to dive into that a little bit more. But false consciousness is where the ruling class, the class in power, is deciding what is normal, what is acceptable. And I think that's part of why Rebekah is such a relatable character here, because you're hearing these rich, old money people saying, this is gauche, this is too loud. And Rebekah is rejecting that. She's not buying into that, where, like, most people, I don't even want to say most people, in this era, most people did buy into that of like, okay, so if this is what the people in power are saying should be done, I should do it. I should try to fit in. I should reject what I want, and I should try to do this in order to be able to be successful if I want to be part of the ruling class. And I think that's what makes Rebekah kind of this like lovable heroine. She's just like, no, she rejects the Rhode Island set forever. She's like, nah, I'm not into this. I want to do what I want to do. I'm not buying into this false consciousness. I don't care what rich people say. I'm also a rich person and I say this, so we're just going to do that instead. And I think that that's kind of fun. You get the voice of like that old money that's trying to say this is what to do, and she's like, no.
What's crazy to me is like how we come in, like, I mean, Jody, you've done a fantastic job like giving us this history of Rebekah Harkness, but like the first time that I ever heard this song, you're going into this album not knowing what to expect. It's track 3, I think you said. Like, do you all remember your reaction the first time you heard the song? Because for me, it was like an instant like, but the fact
absolutely obsessed immediately.
Instant love. And I think,
absolutely.
But I think it goes back to what you were saying, Monsi, about that it is such a good story. And her storytelling device, which I do agree, I believe it comes from her country roots. Like, country songs know how to take a story, frame it, and then have a twist at the end that makes you go, oh my God, are you kidding me?
Builds. Yeah, like add the build.
Builds. And I think that, again, I go back to the book review, the book Blue Blood by Craig Unger, which is about Rebekah Harkness I talked about in the previous episode. The New York Times book review, which was not favorable, said like, oh, I want to know what a feminist take on this would be, what a literary take on this would be, because she was a character. She was eccentric. She did indeed fill the pool with champagne and Dom Perignon. She did indeed. It wasn't a dog that she turned key lime green. It was a cat. But I would imagine because Taylor likes cats, she didn't want to say that a cat was dyed key lime green. So she absolutely was eccentric, yet the way she tells this story is still somewhat empathetic somehow and fun. And I wonder if that's because we too are like, what do you mean this is a middle class divorcee? Like the townspeople are seen as the chaotic, crazy ones here.
I think that's what I'm so stuck on. It's like I'm looking at the lyrics and I'm just looking at the first 3 stanzas, and there's nothing that's like extraordinary, but I think it's something about the delivery of the lyrics, the way that she captured the voice of the townspeople, the way that she, in the 3rd stanza, or like the way that she, I guess, like builds through the 2nd stanza, and then she's like, the 3rd stanza is, there goes the last great American dynasty. That's a little bit of irony, right? Like you're using the townspeople's voice, but you're like, it's kind of ironic. Like you're like, there it goes. Like who knows what could have been? Like we know what could have been. Like we, the listener, actually, but that's the thing. It's like at this point in the song, we don't know. We don't even know where this is going. But right there, she's already managed to capture us. Like there's nothing really crazy in the lyrics, but it's so telling in so few words.
The whole idea of an American dynasty, I think this kind of, again, goes back to, I know this is the deep dive, not the show and tell, but it sort of brings me back to Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince, and the idea of what America was and what we were founded on is very different from what it is today. And so I think so she married Bill Harkness in 1947. He died in the 1950s. So we're talking early 1950s.
20th century.
Yeah, like 20th century. The idea, so this is pre-Kennedy family, which would also probably be the next great American dynasty. So this was not the last great American dynasty. But the whole idea, I'm also now flashing to Ayn Rand. Why am I blanking on the name of the book? Not The Fountainhead, the other one, Atlas Shrugged. Thank you. Another one for the book club. And the idea of it, like an industrial society and a magnate and creating this idea of an American dynasty. Like the whole idea of an American dynasty, it used to be about a business. He was the heir to the Standard Oil name. Now American dynasties have pretty much nothing. I mean, I guess you have... But Bezos isn't a dynasty.
No, he's not. But I think the dynasties do still very much exist out there. I think there are some big names that still have a lot of money. It's just not as, they've kind of retreated. Like they've kind of got out of the public eye. Yeah. They still exist, and they're pulling strings from behind the scenes in a lot of instances, but they've retreated from the public eye.
We don't look at them the same way that they did in the 1950s.
I think it's a shift of media.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Probably, because it's like, who are the most like influential? It's like some people are pulling strings from behind, whereas
don't say it's the Kardashians.
Well, I think like the socialite circle of New York City still does have that to a certain extent. It's just become more insular.
Very big in the South as well.
And there's also very much a thing where it's like, this is like a total side note, but there's this thing that happens with wealthy people and powerful people that when something becomes accessible to the masses, they tend to change because the whole point is whatever they're doing is inaccessible. So to be not in the public eye, to choose to pull back is actually a kind of a new power move compared to you have the money to control the media, so you're suddenly on the front page. But now anyone can be on it, putting their story out there. So now there's a pivot to being less that way. That's the old money versus new money. People who are rich now tend to capitalize on the fame. 100 years, it might be different again. But there is definitely this pattern of, if something becomes widely accessible, people who have power will pivot to something that's not accessible again. And you end up having these circles sometimes.
I love the whole idea that Rebekah living in this beautiful home, being able to throw these parties with champagne and ballet and Dolly was, unsophisticated and like charming. Like that, I think also serves to alienate the townspeople who in this case would be old money and would be, that dignified, gentrified set of people. Like they're very clearly the villains in this story, even though the story is told from their perspective, it is done so with a level of irony and potentially sarcasm that makes us empathize with Rebekah, and then therefore makes us empathize with Taylor when she reveals that she bought the house, and who knows what, if I never showed up, what could have been. Because that's the other part of this twist, is she spends this whole time building up empathy for Rebekah, basically saying, like, here's what everybody said about her, how terrible. And then she says, but now it's me. Now I'm the Rebekah.
And then, like, if there was any doubt at all, it's, like, gone. Like, you may have liked Rebekah before, but I feel like that just completely shifts it. Because we know Taylor. And so it's like, all of a sudden, you're like, I see where this is going. And I feel like that, I mean, I think we've said this at least, like, 4 times between the last 2 episodes. But it's like that bridge definitely is, like, a big light bulb moment. I just remember the very first time that I heard the song, just, like, almost, like, screaming, like, oh my God, yes. You know?
As soon as I heard Rhode Island.
It clicked for you?
Well, a couple of years ago, I went on vacation to Westerly, Rhode Island, which is very close to Watch Hill. And so we obviously took a day trip into Watch Hill and saw the house, which was really cool. I mean, it's a beautiful home. And it really is a stunning view, which brings me to, I'm going to tie it back to the lyrics. In the bridge, they say she was seen on occasion pacing the rock, staring out at the midnight sea. If I lived there, I would do the same thing. I don't understand why that's a problem.
I think that is maybe that this song is all about, like, the subtle little things. There's things that she says that are crazy, that the town people said are crazy. And then there's statements that she makes as a part of that gossip that are not crazy at all. And that is, I think, what makes you have that empathy, because she's sprinkled in things that we today would think are, like, perfectly normal. Like, but people at that time are gossiping about it. That immediately makes you want to distrust the townspeople and makes you want to trust the person who is being talked about. And that's a great example of one. It's like, why would you not do that? And, like, filling a pool with champagne, that sounds awesome to me. That sounds.
If I had that pool and that money, I'd do the same thing.
I think there's an element, the othering, we've talked about the othering a lot, but there's also this, like, class, yes, she's being othered, and yes, she's being considered lower class. And the clear message here is that the problem isn't what she does, the problem is who she is. And that's what we hear over and over again, because, and this is why, like, new money versus old money, one, it's so funny to me because they all have money, so who cares? But it's the, like, well, there still has to be separation. There still has to be something that makes us better and them worse. It's the power. It's where money and power overlap, where it's like, well, you may have money, but you aren't allowed to have the power yet because we have decided you can't. But it even goes back earlier where it's like, it must have been her fault that his heart gave out. She has no power over his functioning of his, like, body. But again, it's not what she does, it's who she is that is the problem. So she could have done everything right, and they would have been like, but she did it, like, a little wrong. Like, it doesn't matter. And that's why I think her story is so satisfying, because everything she does is wrong. And so she gives up on the Rhode Island set forever. Flew in her bitch pack friends from the city. Like, she's, she doesn't try. She doesn't play the game.
Not fun fact, but more about the bitch pack. After graduating in 1932, so she graduated, that must have been high school, right? She and a group of female friends formed the bitch pack, a subculture of local debutantes who enjoyed subverting society events, including lacing punch bowls with mineral oil and performing stripteases on banquet tables.
I mean, losing
incredible.
Dolly, like, she sounds like a hoot. Like, she sounds like a great person to be friends with.
Apparently recently she had a Dolly brooch that was recently sold at auction for $1 million. So the other thing I tried to do here in my research was I wanted to read what Taylor Swift herself might have learned about Rebekah Harkness. And that was pretty hard because most of what has been written was written after this song came out. There was obviously a tremendous response and everybody wanted to know who this person is. So that's why my primary sources were the New York Times obit from 1982, an article on the ballet center that she built in Sneden's Landing, which is in Rockland County, New York. And I grew up in Rockland County, so I thought that was pretty interesting that she had a house there. And then the New York Times review of the book Blue Blood, which was written in 1988. I would imagine that Taylor also read the book Blue Blood. I'm still going to try and get my hands on it. another I loved this fact from the review. A week after her death on June 17th, 1982, the mortal remains of Rebekah Harkness were toted home by her older daughter, Terry, in a Gristedes shopping bag. Gristedes is a grocery store chain in New York City. The ashes were placed in a $250,000 jeweled urn made by Salvador Dali. They didn't fit. Quote, just a leg is in there, or maybe half of her head and an arm, unquote, said Rebekah's friends. I love this woman, even in death.
Yes.
Two notes that are not super about class, just interesting about the song. I think it's really interesting, the line, free of women with madness, they're men in bad habits, and then it was bought by me. What I think is interesting about that is it is the way it's worded is implying that she bought it, and now there are women with madness and men with bad habits in that house now.
We need to do a deep dive on Mad Women, like the theme of Mad Women, because it comes up again, and not just in the song Mad Women, it comes up here, it comes up in Champagne Problems, so maybe it's a Folklore Evermore thing, but yes, she uses...
It's super interesting.
I think it was in Blank Space as well. That's the first time we see Taylor really own the Mad Woman.
Happy to dive into Blank Space anytime.
The other thing with this song that I thought was interesting, and this was more musical, just as I was listening to it, when she ends it saying, I had a marvelous time ruining everything, a marvelous time ruining everything, a marvelous time, I had a marvelous time. The way she sings that, I think there are other interpretations. The way it felt to me as I was like really listening and thinking, it feels like she's savoring it. That she's just like, just this, like the way it musically changes, that she's like, yeah, I am a woman with madness. I don't care what you say I need to do. I'm going to also fill the pool with champagne and have parties and have a grand time. I just thought that was a fun ending.
I was saying it ends up being unapologetic. Like she transitions from saying like, had a marvelous time ruining everything to I had a marvelous time and sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Exactly. She's like, but also like, how is it ruining everything? Like preserving this beautiful home and the history and retelling this story. Like
he ruined the class order of the time. Rhode Island is notorious for old money. It's some of the oldest immigrants. It's all the old business owners. I mean, even to this day, it's made up of some of the richest people in the country. And she ruined the class order. When she moved into this house, do you all remember how old Taylor was when she purchased this house?
It was 2013.
2013, she must have been like 23, 24. She was super young. Like, and Rebekah also was very young, I think, when she moved in. But it's like, for somebody that young to like come in and buy the whole place, especially this time on her own dime, all of that money was Taylor's hard-earned money.
No mortgage.
Yeah. Like, she's just like smashing ceilings, you know? Like, you're smashing the world order, ruining everything. How dare she?
I also think it's kind of fun. Not that everyone wants fame, but like everyone kind of, I think, you know, what's your legacy? How are you going to be remembered? And all of these people, we don't know any of their names, but she just immortalized Rebekah Harkness forever. Like this woman's story is now probably better known, depending on the generation. I mean, definitely depending on the generation, but like our generation and younger, if you say like Vanderbilt, they'd be like university. They're not going to know people at most. But you say Rebekah Harkness and people are going to be like, oh yeah, the Taylor Swift song. Like that's just kind of fascinating to me. Like the legacy of this is incredible, that she is immortalizing the story of a woman who rejected societal standards and lived her own life, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, I do. I like the attention that a lot of wealthy people do this. I feel like mostly artists, because artists tend to be more romantic in that sense. You, like for example, very famous. Like I live close to wine country over here, and Robert Mondavi is known as like the father of wine country. He has this beautiful house that he used to live in up on a hill. There is now a new kind of businessman who has invested in a lot of the wineries. He's bought a lot of the wineries. He's like currently very big in the wine industry, named Jean-Claude Bossette, I believe is his name. JCB, owns a ton of wines, and he lives in Robert Mondavi's house apparently. It's one of those things where it's like, you want to tie yourself to the legacy. I think artists do this a lot too, where it's like you'll find similarities and you'll want to connect yourself to that moment because you're almost like cementing your name, building your legacy in relation to somebody else who has done something similar or something big. It's like you make that connection and it makes both of you immortal. And I think that's really cool, actually.
The only other thing that I thought was kind of interesting about this is that they named it Holiday House, which I think is a really interesting name for a house. It's very cute, but it's also like, I don't know, it feels very dreamy to me. Like you just get married and you're going to be with someone and you're going to say, our life together is a permanent holiday. Like our home is going to be this like permanent, like just blissful thing. That's what it feels to me. It feels like this really sweet aspirational name to say like this house we're going to live in is going to be a holiday.
I mean, living there looks like it would be a holiday. It was really pretty. She had a lot of houses, though. This was not her only vacation home. I think they had a house in Switzerland as well. They had the house up in the country in Dean's Landing, house in Manhattan. Yeah, she had no shortage of homes. Must be nice. Jen, you want to wrap us up with your favorite question?
Sure. So, what do you guys think the purpose of this song is now that we have analyzed it? I had so much fun analyzing it. I was not thinking about the purpose. So
I wouldn't either. But I think the purpose is to kind of like redeem Rebekah a little bit in the eyes of, even if it's just in the eyes of Taylor, that, again, I go back to the book review, like of wanting her story to be told in a different way. I've got to imagine Taylor read her story and decided that she was going to take it into her own hands and write this story from the feminist perspective, from the literary perspective, and redeem Rebekah as, yeah, she was eccentric and she had fun, but she did have a marvelous time ruining everything. And that's how Taylor feels too. Like, I'm going to own it. I'm going to embrace it. That here's, you might call me new money, but okay, so what? I'm enjoying it. So I think it's a really beautiful way to feel comfortable with who you are, despite what other people think and are saying about you.
Yeah, I put this song in the same category of songs like Blank Space, The Man. In Lover, I think she does do a lot of commentary on like, oh, sorry, this one wasn't on Lover though, was it?
This is on Folklore.
Yeah, but I think like in this category, like in Lover, she started with the man, like she's talking about how people perceive her. Mad Woman is another one that is on Folklore, I believe. It's Folklore, where she's like talking about the commentary of like how women are perceived. Blank Space is like kind of where she started this. And I really see this song in that same vein of like a different angle of her addressing things that were about her in the media, the way that people would talk about her. In the 1989 era, like all of the media was on fire about the squad that Taylor Swift had, this like the crazy parties, just like irresponsibleness of a celebrity who's gotten too much money and seems to have too much power and just seems to do whatever the heck she wants. How dare she? And this song, I think, the first and foremost purpose of the song, I think, is to really, it's really that last bit, which is like, I had a marvelous time and I'm not sorry about it. And the way that she goes about doing that is through this story of Rebekah Harkness and using that parallel of characters. I think she does it so magnificently to like paint this picture of another time in history when people made similar comments about somebody, which when you look on that, you're actually like, that wasn't that crazy. I don't know why people made such a big deal about it. And she's like, okay, yeah, but this still happens today. It's happening to me. So when you're criticizing me like this, what gives? I'm having a great time and I'm not sorry. And I just, like what a masterful way of telling that story. I just love it. The song was a love at first sight for me. And even after going through it, I'm like, heck yeah, Taylor, good work.
I actually think a lot of the Hamilton, who lives, who dies, who tells your story kind of concept.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
I thought about that a lot with this, where Taylor was like, I'm going to tell her story. And I think there are hundreds of reasons for that. We can look at it. She's a woman who's telling that story. She is a woman who did not come from extreme wealth and old money, who has been thrust into a new circle and she's navigating it. So we can think of it from class, from gender and all of that. But I think to me, I don't know, like it's this, to me, this reads like someone who uncovered a story that has been, I think, a comfort is what it feels like, that this has been a story of comfort, a story that of someone who she loves and who she admires, and that this song was her chance to do her justice, to pay honor to someone who was breaking the mold, who was rejecting standards in a time when it was a lot harder to do that, and has served as inspiration, I think, for Taylor. And I think Taylor's turning around and giving the story to the rest of us and saying, I hope you're inspired too.
I love it.
All right. That is a wrap on The Last Great American Dynasty. That is all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us at AP Taylor Swift on all social channels to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.